Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for watching this video. My name is Avenger1. This video is directed specifically at Chris Roberts and the CIG development team behind the flight model, the design, and the combat balancing for StarCitizen moving into 2024 and beyond. I want to specifically state there are issues with the current state of the game that I'm going to block out for you folks, and it wasn't until this message here posted by Yogi on Spectrum where I felt it was necessary for me to put my best foot forward to try and explain what is actually happening and then what is being said on Spectrum. I feel like there is either a massive amount of miscommunication going on, or there is a simply large hole of knowledge that is simply not being crossed. I have been part of this community since the very beginning. I've watched the game rise and fall in popularity. I've watched every single flight model iteration since the very beginning. It's gone through good stages and bad. But what's been constant is the reiterative process that StarCitizen's flight combat has gone through, and some of the core issues in geometry with the design of the system that still have not been addressed, that for some reason either are escaping most CIG developers or is being chosen to be left behind, which is going to be a critical flaw in the design of StarCitizen, because if these issues are not solved on the geometric level, no amount of balancing, tuning, or fine, mechanics like Maelstrom are going to stop the fact that ships are able to engage each other from significantly longer ranges, which makes all multi-crew ships obsolete, which thus in turn makes multi-crew ships unusable in combat, which I'm sure is going to be detrimental to the experience of the game. Now, for those of you folks who know me, you know I'm very passionate about StarCitizen and the combat system. It's what I do. I've been part of many tournaments throughout the years of StarCitizen, including the one last year at CitizenCon. I have made a lot of friends within CIG. I think they're amazing, incredible people that are very talented. And I think, and my hope is that they understand that this is my perspective, my point of view that's been galvanized through 10 years, almost a decade of playing StarCitizen at a high level at a competitive setting. And so, although I may talk a lot about different subjects, this one in particular, StarCitizen Combat, is something I know, and I know very well. It is my profession, and I love it. That being said, I'd like to read what Yogi posted and briefly go over some notes and points and some things that are simply wrong, misunderstood, or just simply need some explaining. So let's quickly read over what Yogi posted here. You should see it on the screen. So the question was asked by Birdwatcher, who says, "Hello, Yogi. We're just for on the same page. Could you please elaborate what specifically Master Modes has achieved? Which design/gameplay goals have been met thus far in the iterative process?" It's a fair question. Yogi responds with, "The main goal around Master Modes was to reintroduce the relative slow flight gameplay. We're talking World War II speeds. The reason for this is that with 3.0, the persistent universe was added, so StarCitizen had to offer ways to simply traverse the game. Right, traveling great distances, you have to have lots of speed. Makes sense? Hence, the high transversal speeds had to be added. That, however, fundamentally broke the intended combat geometry, small bubbles of exciting combat gameplay. What is the result? What resulted is over a long period of time is that there is a tiny portion of players that got really good at playing PvP combat, though relying solely on one or two strategies. But overall, the players engaging in combat consistently dropped over time. The Master Modes change was proposed a few years ago to keep the main gameplay loops of transversal versus everything else separated and make combat more accessible again. Therefore, we prototyped and tested it internally for a while, moved it to Squadron 42, and finally moved it back to the Persistent Universe stream last year, where we tested it in AC for 2 cycles before releasing it this year." There are multiple things just simply wrong, and to be honest, a bit infuriating about these statements. Number one, they're claiming that, if we read here, what resulted is over a long period of time, the tiny portion of players that got really good at PvP combat, relying on 2 strategies, and overall players engaging in combat consistently dropped. The reason why players consistently kept dropping from combat CIG was because of the lack of tutorial systems and explanation, the lack of server stability and content, the lack of actual tuning and economy balance that actually keeps people invested in your product and your game, and the consistent use of marketing strategies which are bitterizing and, I guess you could say, pissing off the majority of your community when it comes to selling ships that you claim are a certain way, and yet when they're actually used and implemented, it doesn't feel or look anything close to it. Take the Inferno, for example. So to blame the lack of player interest in the development of CIG's game based on the flight system with incomplete data is just simply wrong. The real reason why the combat system previously was changed, which in my opinion CIG is afraid to say, is that it was too difficult for the majority of players to sink their teeth into and understand, which is fine, but let's tell the truth about it. Okay? Second of all, PvP pilots getting really good is part of a natural process of the game. We've been through 4 different flight models, and every time we go through the same process. A flight model comes out, there's a lot of activity, people start getting into it, the really good players start to play more, and you have what's called a Pareto distribution, where the very top 1% of players will eventually rise to the top, like the foam rises to the top, and the rest of the people eventually get either pushed out or, I would say, they create mental barriers where they believe they cannot break into that top 1%. The reason you have that is because of lack of training, lack of awareness, and lack of education with the design and manufacturing of the actual flight system itself. If you give people the training, you give people the education, and you promote them to go out there and start training, that ratio starts to dramatically change. So, second point, talking about 2 strategies that PvP pilots rely on. This, I'm assuming, comes from what's known as tricording, which is multiple input vectors. To put it in layman's terms, if the main thruster is pushing forward and then you add the side thruster onto it, those combined thrusts push your ship faster than if you just use a single thruster moving forward, which is what would happen in space because it's based off a physics-driven model. Now, most people either don't know that because it's not intuitive, because most of us weren't raised as pilots or astronauts. So there comes a time where you have to educate the player base on how ships move in space. Now, they took the route of removing that nuance and removing that state of movement and replacing it with what's known as the single vector movement, which is what we have in master modes, which we'll go into a bit later. But to claim that PvP pilots relied on 2 strategies when those 2 strategies were understanding 3-dimensional movements, vectors, merges, flight characteristics, accelerations, all the aspects of what makes a good pilot, if that's considered exploitation, I'm really not sure what to tell you. Because that's like telling a Formula 1 driver you're changing your tires on the 50th lap because you get better traction if the tires are at a different state. You're actually exploiting. You should just race. People are always going to play at the highest level and gain whatever advantage they possibly can. It is not the players that are at fault for using the design specifications of your game. It is in a different world when it's clearly exploitive or not really in the intended function. But for the most part, ships and movement and the way the ships flew in 322 was significantly better than what we have in master modes because it allowed for a massive breadth of movement, a massive breadth of, I guess you could say, skill expression, where ships could genuinely engage each other. And the most defining factor, whether a ship was successful or not, was the knowledge and skill set the pilot brought to the fight rather than the kit, weapons, and gear that they've bought off the storefront. They also go into detail here saying to try to make combat more accessible again, which is fine, but if you're going to make combat more accessible, instead what we've done is we've actually made combat less accessible with master modes with the introduction of nav mode, afterburner mode, and all these other things that come along with that. So, for example, we have 2 speed zones now. Now, for a rookie pilot, someone that's very new, they go from SCM to afterburner. And for those watching, what it means is when your ship goes into a different energy state, so when you press the afterburner button, your ship's overall top speeds and ways that it can move expand. But they expand in a non-linear way. It's not like you're inside a bubble that goes 200, and then when you hit afterburner, your bubble turns to 600. What happens is you stay inside your SCM bubble, and then you press a button, and your bubble extends only in the forward direction. And so now what you've done is you've now had to make new pilots or players that are new to the game be able to extrapolate in three-dimensional space while they're moving and still be able to know where they are inside that asymmetrical cone is something that even to me as an expert pilot is still mind-boggling. And to hide those mechanics and to change everything to try and force ships together, I think comes from a fundamental lack of understanding and a lack of actual game time playing with the system to realize that that doesn't feel good. The other point about this is we tried Afterburner a long time ago and it didn't work. People didn't like it. And yet here we have it again. So it seems like we are learning the same lessons over again, which makes people in the community feel like you're wasting their time, wasting their money, and wasting the devs, which I'm sure CIG doesn't want the community to feel. So then they go on to tell that they've achieved the following things. This is what they claim Master Modes has achieved. Combat on average is much closer now simply because speeds are lower. That's incorrect. And the reason for that is two things. One, combat is closer on the macro scale. So when you have a fight that's happening in the persistent universe, you're not going to be using the actual planet or the moon in some situations as an object to play against in a dogfight. This example here you see on the screen is a dogfight in the previous model where speeds were going up to the 900 to 1,000 meter mark, and I was actually using the backdrop of the planet to force my tailing target to make different maneuvers and turn around and use it basically as a backstop. In Master Modes, we don't have anywhere close to that I guess you could say, breadth of movement. So the planet will be a nice thing to look at, but it won't be something that you'll actually be able to use in a dogfight, which one felt really, really cool because you were using moons to actually dogfight with, which is unlike any other experience I've ever been in. And I think a lot of people felt the same way. It'll now just look cool, but we'll never be able to use that as a backstop. You'd have to be super, super close. The gunnery system we have in Master Modes, we've now increased the weapon velocities and the ranges by an exponential amount. So what ends up happening is you actually end up shooting your guns at farther ranges. And so actually turning with your targets, I find that you're actually shooting from farther away, but the macro scale of the general battle is staying in a tighter space. So technically they could argue that yes, fighting is not having as much of a slingshot effect, but actually getting the meaningful distance of fights where two ships are fighting each other, the distances are slightly larger than what I was experiencing with in the previous flight model, because we had the space to move around each other and get into really close range fights. And now in Master Modes, it's mostly fighting at 500 to 700 meters, whereas the previous model, you were mostly fighting within 200 to 400 meters. So this comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of combat. The problem is those close range fights were typically only accessible to the more experienced, more trained pilots. So, you know, the real question is, why are we punishing the depth of a game? And to say that, you know, combat speeds are closer and all that stuff when it's just simply not true. And it doesn't really take a long time to train a pilot going from no skill to high skill. It takes about, you know, a couple of weeks to a month. To at least get the basics down. They say combat is overall more accessible and balanced. The reality is combat has never been less accessible and never been less balanced. There is only 3 ships that are viable: the Blade, the Buccaneer, the Mark II Hornet. Those are basically the 3 only viable-ish ships. Everything else is just variations of not as good. We have one archetype, the Interceptor, completely able to dominate in a team battle space, whereas light fighters have essentially become the universe's punching bag or laughing stock, because the game has gone from a movement-based system to a DPS tank-based system, which makes fighters feel like they're capital ships fighting each other, which doesn't feel good, I can tell you that. They claim that Master Modes is made more accessible to rookies, and I would argue against this because simply it's hard enough for a rookie to understand one player like play space, but to have multiple speed zones and asymmetric speed zones within those multiple speed zones and going into nav mode and understanding that system, you've now added 3 extra layers on throttle control. And so instead of smoothly transitioning to the high speeds, you've now made stop gaps. You've made the SCM stopgap, the Afterburner stopgap, and then the nav mode stopgap. And you as a pilot have to now switch in between those modes seamlessly, which makes it immensely more difficult, less rewarding. It just does not feel good. It does not feel good. And they make the claim here that it comes from slower speeds, escaping is harder. So escaping has never been easier because you simply hit the nav button and off you go. Okay, every ship can basically just hit the nav button and fly away. The only time where it becomes a problem is when you add interdiction onto the field, and then everything breaks down, and the only ships that actually survive those environments are typically interceptors because they have the speeds to manage the fights. So most fights have no interdiction, so you just hit the button and off you go. So to say escaping is harder is such an insanely wrong statement. I can only understand it as either ignorance of what's actually happening, which is pretty sad, or they're just straight up lying. The addition of courting limiters, which is a sole strategy. Okay, this is infuriating too. The addition of courting limiters. So what's happening is they took away the tri-courting, which I explained before, which means you're adding multiple vectors to push yourself farther in one direction quicker. And now they've made us exist in a sphere. And so if I make multiple inputs, so what happens is when you're adding multiple inputs and you're pushing into the square, you're actually increasing your speed in like a non-linear direction. But with courting limiters, they've put us inside a circle. And so I might go fully forward and then fully to the right and add those multiple inputs. I'm going to basically reach the edge of the sphere, which isn't going to give me any extra acceleration. It'll still give me the same acceleration as if I was going forward. It'll just give me less. It just won't give me that extra little bit of space, which is fine, but that's not how ships work in space. And what it also does is it disallows us to be able to push around targets, because now it makes us only go in the forward direction X amount of speed. And so now we have to basically have a ship with significantly higher turn rate to even have a chance at creating any kind of close range, knife fighting, exciting cinematic gameplay. Because geometrically, a sphere, when it's overlapping, isn't going to have as much overlap as two squares when they move around, because the squares, when they overlap, will have extra space on those edges. And then they claim here that it was the pilot strategy that they relied on. I find this to be quite insulting. First of all, your pro pilots are your greatest resource. If I'm the CIG company and I have professional pilots that are playing 8 to 10 hours a day every day and really understanding the system, to point them out and say that they're just a bunch of exploiters utilizing the model that you created is not really kind to the community that has propped up, funded, and supported this project from the beginning. It's also good to know that your pro pilots that people like to shit on all the time are typically the players out there that are creating a tremendous amount of content and education material to help the general public understand and better educate and fly your game. So I would see them as an asset, not something that you should lambaste or put into a box. Because if I was you, I would appreciate these people a bit more, because they're basically doing all the hard R&D work for you for free. They also go on to say, coupled with very strict tuning limits for ship archetypes, this improved group fights and made sure that pro pilots can't take on 7 newbies anymore. This is, wow. Every part of that statement was wrong. Every part of it. So combat limits and ship archetypes has led us to one reality, that one archetype, the interceptor, has become dominant over all the other archetypes, okay? Which has literally created the same problem in a different space. In the previous model, in 322, the previous flight model, we had the light fighter meta, which was basically an acceleration meta. So any ship that had very high acceleration was able to dominate the battle space because it could choose where it wants to be at any time, including in or out of a fight. Now, that sounds very familiar to the interceptor in master modes. The master mode's interceptor can engage, disengage, and move around the battle space at free will, regardless of where it is in the fight. Which is exactly the same thing that we had in the previous model. And so you haven't created a light fighter meta or fixed it. You may have nerfed the light fighter into absurdity so that nobody viably uses it anymore. And you've now created that same problem in another category called interceptor, and you've locked it behind a speed wall, and you've been like, well, we've got archetypes. So unfortunately, we have also failed on this respect. The other statement they make here is that group fights that make sure that pro pilots can't take on 7 newbies anymore. This is very troubling to me, and I'll explain why. If you're creating a skill-based game, now if I remember correctly, Mr. Roberts, your pitch for the original experience of StarCitizen was there are no character skills, there are no levels, there are no stats to your character. It is you as the human being experiencing the world, and your skills as the person that you are utilized in the world is going to define whether you are successful or not successful in combat, in trade, in negotiation, all that stuff. Which, in my personal opinion, is the greatest asset to StarCitizen that any game has ever made. It truly makes the experience something that is world-class, and we should lean into this, not lean away from it. But there is a balance. Now, this statement of pro pilots can't take on 7 newbies anymore is also incorrect, because if you watch my recent video, I take on, it's called Just Nav Out, bro. I take on, I think, 10 or 12 fighters of actually really relatively decently trained pilots, like not even noobs, and we kill all of them. So your pro pilot is still going 12v2, 10v2, that kind of stuff. So to say that you can't take on these surmounting odds is just simply not true. And this comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of the system that you're designing. And this worries me, because if Yogi is the designer of the system and he doesn't even know that you can still take on 7 newbies, then he's also failed in that respect, which makes me worried, because does that mean he's going to take this and increase and decrease the skill ceiling even more to reach some arbitrary number of you're not able to do this, that, and the other? Now, in most situations, the archetypes are in a very weird spot. Light fighters, no matter how good you are in terms of your skill set, the chance of you beating a light fighter in a 1v1 duel is almost nothing. And so they've pigeonholed these ships into specific categories. And so you've basically created a rock, paper, scissors style environment, but rock, the interceptor, beats scissors and paper as long as it does a specific thing. It's just, the whole system falls apart because it's not fixed any of these things. All these claims of combat distances and balances, all of this is wrong. Like, all of this is wrong. I don't understand how this is not, like, how CIG is not aware of this, right? Ship differences are a lot more meaningful because the cording limiters making differences actually matter. This is also false. Ship differences are a lot more meaningful. Wrong. The only ship difference that matters are interceptors. That's the only ship difference. So there's basically everyone else and interceptors. Okay? Now, you can nerf the interceptors into the ground, but then what you're going to do is you're just going to create another meta, because you've not understood the geometric differences between how ships fight in space. We're not fighting airplanes in space. We're fighting spheres, 2 balls in space, and how they fight against each other. Because this ball can move any direction. This ball can move any direction. And so what we're doing is we're not doing 2 airplanes which have to chase each other through, where you actually have to do aerodynamic gameplay, because with airplanes and lift surfaces and minimum stall times, all these parts about how flight works is dependent on the technology and systems that humans have right now in terms of thrust ratios, all that stuff. We actually need to use the air as an energy surface to create momentum, to keep our planes stuck into turns. That's why we have wings and all that stuff. You have fighters in StarCitizen that have 25 Gs of acceleration. You don't need flight surfaces. You're a huge rocket that has probably 20 times the acceleration of the Tesla SpaceX rockets that are getting sent up today. And so this completely changes the dynamic of movement. And they're claiming that the removal of chord limiters makes the differences that actually matter. This can't be a more wrong statement. This is such a wrong statement. So I'm just going to give Yogi the benefit of the doubt because English is his second language. But if what he means here is that the reason why ships were like in terms of what ships were good against what ships was completely dependent on whether or not they could trichord, oh boy, you're very wrong. The reason why ships are good and bad against each other is the physical size of a ship and the acceleration that they have. Now, whether you trichord that or not, it doesn't matter. Notice how the Buccaneer, physically small, high DPS, high acceleration. Why do you think it's doing so well? It's because of those three metrics. Physical size matters, acceleration to engage and disengage when they want, and burst DPS to actually secure kills. Those three things in one package makes the best fighter. So having good turn rates like a Gladius and low hit, like all these other metrics just simply don't matter. It's like running a marathon, or sorry, let's say you're running a 500-meter sprint. The person that has the highest burst sprint is going to win. Any other metric that you measure that on is just simply unnecessary. It doesn't matter if the other guy can run 25 miles without stopping. If he can't win the 500-meter sprint, the space that it exists in, that ship will excel. So in the space of dogfighting, where acceleration, top speed, and burst damage are the only things that really matter, let alone turn rate doesn't matter, DP, like how much ship damage you have doesn't really matter that much. If you're a good pilot, you can mitigate that. So you've created an archetype that excels at exactly the stuff that you need to excel at in a three-dimensional environment for space fighters. And then you wonder why some ships are just so far ahead of the rest of the pack. And to say that it's based off tuning metrics, like if you could trichord or not, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're tricording or using the current thruster model that we have where you have high acceleration. It doesn't matter. What matters is what G's can you get out of your ship, right? Whether you're getting those through tricording or you're getting those through normal movement like we have in master modes, it doesn't matter. What's the maximum G's you can get from your ship? That's what matters. So they go on to say that these things are a pretty big win for us and that it's mirrored by a bigger chunk of the player engaging in combat and feedback given over time and channels. This is the big statement. They claim that this is a big win, and yet nothing has been improved. In fact, we've now added more barriers to new players, and we've added a lot more difficulty to combat in non-intuitive, non-meaningful ways. So if that's a big win to you, it's not a big win to me. Also, they're claiming that a big chunk of players are engaging in combat. Okay, so let's talk about the numbers here. So if you create a new gaming, like a new combat system, and you put it out, you are going to have a massive increase in popularity for a small time because everybody wants to try the new system, and they have. And now what we're seeing is a massive, massive drop-off in player activity. I have never in all my life seen StarCitizen so empty and so devoid of activity. And even though you're selling ships and you're creating accounts by the daily, what matters is what's actually happening in the game space. Because if people aren't engaging in combat, if people just are not interested in it, if people are complaining about combat 24/7, this should tell you that there's a big issue with the combat system. And to say that it's a big win and that they're getting all this feedback and that a big chunk of players are engaging in combat, that's great, but you're losing players much faster now than you're gaining them. And it's, again, it's bitterizing the player base. Nobody wants to buy a large vessel, because here's the reality right now. Nobody wants to buy a large ship like a Constellation, a 600i, an MSR, anything that's multi-crew, and go out into the persistent universe and get absolutely dunked on by a bunch of fighters and have no chance at defending themselves. If that's the experience you want to create, Mr. Roberts, go for it. Because you're not going to have a game past Squadron 42. Because if your multi-crew ships are so useless that they can't even defend themselves against a small team of fighters, what is the point of bringing a multi-crew ship into the game? Why even use it? You know, it's frustrating to me that these geometric issues with multi-crew ships and all these other issues with combat are still to this day either from CIG unaware, uneducated, or just simply wrong. Because if you don't fix those geometric issues, you're not going to have a game where ships can exist and be able to fight each other, and there won't be a seriously unbalanced meta at the horizon. Unless you fix this, you're always going to have the light fighter meta, because the ships that have the most maneuverability, the most ability to move, like, you know, it's a fighter, the most ability to move around the environment is going to be the dominant factor in whether or not you can engage and disengage. Instead of leaning away from that, you should lean into it. If you lean into the three-dimensional movement system of 6 degrees of freedom, if you lean into ships having the speeds like we had in the previous model, you create an experience that is unlike anything anyone in the world has ever experienced, and in a really positive way. The problems that we had with the old model weren't really so much big issues that could have been solved with an asymmetric speed zone, but having one speed zone to make it all work. Having these multiple speed zones, afterburner, SCM, nav mode, all this stuff, it just doesn't work. People don't like it. Because if they did like it, I wouldn't be seeing the massive amount of frustration and master modes trash talk that I've seen since this stuff started coming out. So I don't know what's happening at CIG. I don't know who's on what or why people are on what projects. That's totally fine. I'm not a business owner, and I'm also not someone who's working for CIG. But whatever the case may be, and whoever is on the project, there needs to be some accountability and some people put in the positions to make combat really, really good again, because what we have right now is not holding people's attention. It's bitterizing the community. It's creating a lot of divisiveness. It's just simply not working. And I have nothing personal against Mr. Yogi. I think he's a great dude, and I'm not angry with him, or I'm not trying to make this about Yogi. I'm trying to talk specifically about the reasons that we're coming up with here are just simply not true, because because combat ranges aren't closer, because it's not more accessible and balanced, even though they're claiming it is. The courting limiters weren't the problem, which they claim it is. The archetypes aren't what you think they are, because there's one super dominant archetype, the interceptor. Claiming that pilots can't take on 7 newbies is, I prove it every day on stream almost. To say that there are a bigger chunk of players engaging in combat, which is not true, because people wanted to try it, and now we have the biggest drop off in players that we've ever seen. And to claim that it's a big win and that they're really happy with it, it just makes us think in the community, you're wasting our time and money. And people don't like that. People are going to want refunds. They're going to get, they're going to be upset about it, and it's going to lead to more bad press and more bad stuff for StarCitizen, which I don't want to see, because I want to see StarCitizen be the best possible game it can be and be able to play it for the next 20 or 30 years. Like you said yourself, I want this game to be the wing commander for a generation. Well, we can't get there if we don't have honest discussion about the combat system. The reasons that are coming up here is it's just not true. So either that's incompetence, ignorance, or lying. There's only 3 things. Incompetence is okay, because then it just needs more training, which is what I'm saying. They need more training and understanding of what's actually going on. If it's ignorance, well, I mean, that's okay. We can just educate. Education is key, But if it's lying, that's bad. And I'd like to assume that CIG is not just lying to its fan base, but when CIG puts out stuff like this, I can't help but feel pissed off and angry, because clearly, from my point of view, and a lot of us here in the combat community, or many people that engage in StarCitizen's combat, know for a fact that all these things listed here and said are just simply not true. And anybody watching this video is welcome to come to my stream, welcome to show up and take a look at what's going on, and I will prove to you empirically, without a doubt, all these reasons that I'm talking about here. I can show you myself. They go on to say there's a rough selection of things that are pretty dominant in our own internal list to approach. So this is the stuff they're talking about approaching. Tuning wise, there are several ships and weapons in the wrong place. My worry is that they're going to take something like the Buccaneer, and instead of understanding why the ship is doing so well, they're just going to simply nerf it across the board, and they're going to create another meta. So they're going to put a band-aid fix on a solution that is a geometrical problem. Watch my words, mark my words, they're going to nerf the Buccaneer to the ground, and they're going to do something else, which is just going to lead to another ship, probably an interceptor, that's going to become the meta. The claim is the maneuvering options are too limited. Nose-to-nose DPS fighting and backstrafing are too dominant. This, again, this comes from a serious misunderstanding of the movement system, because the maneuvering options are too limited because of the geometrical overlap of two spheres instead of two cubes on each other. Cubes are tricording, spheres are not. Now, you can create an environment that allows us to outrate people, but when you've added so many speed walls that by the time I try to scoot around my target, I bump up on a speed wall and I can't actually get past him. I can't push around him because I've now hit my speed limit. And this speed limit is meant to keep ships closer and more cinematic, which ironically enough has created fights in terms of the gunnery space to be longer and fights to be less cinematic, because you've removed the space needed to create actual turn and dogfighting gameplay. Again, someone who fundamentally understands the geometric system would understand this, but clearly this is not the case. The maneuvering options are too limited. Yeah, we talked about that. Mining flows suffer. I don't know what mining flow is. Trapping mechanics are not as fun as they should be. You think? You know, as an avid pirate in StarCitizen's persistent universe, I have never once engaged somebody and had them like have a genuinely great time. Because imagine being in a multicrew ship with your friends, you know, and getting trapped by a mantis with your shields down, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. Because you're getting shot at by fighters from, I don't know, 1,500 to 2,000 meters away, and you have no weapon systems in the game that can reach out and touch those fighters. Not one. So we've created this Kobayashi Maru situation where if you're in a multicrew ship and you get tackled, it's over. There's no fighting. There's no fighters might die and it's going to be like, they caught me, but I can fight my way out of this. Nope. It's caught. You might as well put your controller down, step back, and walk away. Because you're probably just as good off doing that, because you're going to save yourself some mental stress of thinking that you have a chance and just getting absolutely blasted into oblivion. And I'll tell you right now, that's not going to sell ships. When multi-crew ships are a big joke like they are now and still continue to be a big joke, that's not going to sell ships. Nav mode feels too vulnerable. Well, maybe if we didn't have nav mode like we had in the previous model and we kept our shields and guns, everyone would be a lot happier. It said flight feels too slow at times, even though we're buzzing around at Mach 1 at times. See, this is even though we're buzzing at Mach 1, nobody cares. Nobody cares. Nobody cares what the numbers are. People care about how fast the combat feels. And here's my problem. This arbitrary idea, conceptually, as fights should be in the World War II space. Mr. Roberts, if you'd like to create a World War II dogfighting style game with those ranges and distances, you cannot have missiles part of that experience. Because if you have missiles part of that experience, the speeds have to come up. Because it's like adding a technology to ancient feudal Europe. In the 1400s, we had long swords, spears, cavalry, all that stuff. If you had a regiment of musketeers, it would completely change the dynamic of combat. So in dogfighting, when you have World War II fighters, it's all guns all the time. Maybe some rockets that are unguided, but it's all guns all the time. That's why you could exist in a space with gunnery. But when you add missiles, like the F-14 Tomcat in the Cold War and stuff, notice how the speeds of dogfighting went significantly up once we start engaging in the Cold War. And now, to this day, we have an even faster weapons platform. But modern dogfighting aside, the point is, when there's a fundamental shift of technology, you can't just ignore the response to that. Missiles, you need to develop planes that can actually avoid them. So either you're going to significantly drop the speeds of missiles or completely change the whole system, which should be a thing on the table. Because one can't exist in a battle space with the other. And it might look cinematic and cool, but in a multiplayer environment, players are going to use whatever they possibly can to gain an advantage, especially in a game that has permanent death or death of a spaceman mechanics, where there's some loss associated to losing a battle. People are not going to pull the stops out. They're going to use whatever tools they possibly can to win. They're talking about the transition to low/high speed doesn't feel right because we have 3 stop gaps on the speed: SCM, afterburner, nav mode, buttons to switch between them. It's not smooth. It's not intuitive. It doesn't feel good. We've tried this before. Why are we back here in 2024? Look, this was my perspective. I'm trying to explain this in the most calm, rational, straightforward way possible. But the reality of the situation is combat in StarCitizen has never been worse. We don't have honest communication from CIG about the reasons as why combat was changed, and they're claiming that things have been they're claiming it's in such a better state when clearly it's not. So there needs to be some soul searching on CIG's part. I think there needs to be some serious steps taken to understand the combat. And I'm going to apologize if people who've watched this video, especially folks who work for CIG, feel like they've been attacked or that I'm personally coming after them. That was never my intention. I love you guys all. I really, truly do. I only want this game to succeed. But we can't have this game succeed if we're not willing to have hard conversations about what's going on and stuff like can't take on 7 newbies. I mean, first of all, who are you to tell what the maximum skill ceiling of somebody should be? That's number one. You know, talking about combat's much closer. We talked about all this stuff. So this is my 2 cents. I'm very disappointed. I'm very disappointed with this message. It just tells me that CIG isn't even in the ballpark when it comes to understanding what's going on with the combat system. And how are you supposed to fix something if you don't understand it, right? I'm sorry if this came across as rude or insensitive. You know, I'm not here to hurt people's feelings. I'm not here to try to put the company in a bad light. I'm not here to be upset. You know, even though this video is directed straight towards Chris Roberts, I think it's very unlikely that you'll watch this video, especially with how long it is. But my hope is that whoever does watch this video, whether it's at CIG or in the community, understands that there is an issue going on here. And when we see posts like this, it just tells everyone else that SIG doesn't really understand what the fundamental issues with the combat are. And so we either need to have some education or we need to have some soul searching done because it's just simply not working. I've never seen StarCitizen combat in a worse place. This is my personal feedback, so take it with a grain of salt. You know, I'm not here to bum anybody out. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for doing what you do. So please forgive me if I've come across as rude or pretentious. But I feel very strongly about this game. I feel very strongly about the combat system because I really, really, really want StarCitizen to win. I want it to win so bad. It's the biggest game in the world. I really want that. But we can't get there if we're not honest about what's going on. And so, you know, I've been around for 10 years. I've been through every iteration of this game. I've been through all the ups and downs of combat. This is what I teach. This is what I do. I compete in tournaments. I know StarCitizen combat. I know it. So I don't know much else, but I do know this. So it's like Joe Rogan likes MMA. This is my MMA. So that's my rant, folks. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you made it to the end of the video, salutes to you. Thank you so much. We stream every day at 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time here on Twitch at Avenger__1. And then obviously we have the YouTube channel for everyone who wants to engage in education and stuff like that. Yogi, I love you, buddy. You know, please don't take this personally. And everyone else at CIG, keep working hard. And we're all excited for the inevitable success, hopefully, of StarCitizen. But we'll see.